And I'm here today with Ben Vidgen from the iFinity FM Southland studios there. Ben, welcome to the program.
Good morning. If you're in it, you got to ask why.
We're going to talk about the Tiwai.
Oh, certainly, and there's lots of whys here. What would your readers like to specifically know about this? Let's start with what they think they know, and then we can work our way backwards.
First of all, I don't have readers, I have listeners and watchers.
Sorry, I'm ignorant, mate.
But regardless, I know nothing about it. What is Tiwai, first of all?
Okay, Tiwai is basically a large aluminium smelter. It was one of the projects that was built during the 1980s by Molding under Think Big. Probably the money for that, actually the bridging finance for Think Big, actually came from via Adnan Khashoggi, and it was probably done as part of a deal. Leave your oil in the Southern Basin and change your investment law so that we can come in and buy all your land and all your infrastructure so that when we run out of oil, we can have basically taken over your country. So that's the history of Tiwai Point. It's basically been grossly subsidised in the time it's been running. Like, most households pay 21 cents in the dollar. Tiwai smelter runs at 1 cent in the unit, and that's all about to run out, which is about the same time they started talking about layoffs.
You said that this Tiwai Point shutdown would be an economic disaster for Southland. How is that?
Well, I mean, it would be on two levels. I mean, okay, if you're talking about Southland itself, there's 820 people work at the plant. They basically support and turn about 3,500 jobs. So you'd be looking at about 4,000 wage packets that would go poof. I mean, in reality, if we had a government that actually gave a damn about this country, what they'd turn around and do is they'd say, hey, you know what, Kamilka, stuff your subsidy. We're shutting you down. You can pay the $120 million. We've worked out that it's cheaper than to actually pay all the wages of everyone that works at Tiwai Point than pay you for the rest of their natural course of their lives. We're going to employ them as Southland Rangers, so they're going to build infrastructure projects. That would be more cheaper and more productive. But no, instead what they'll do is they'll shut it down. If they do shut it down, they'll take those wages out of the economy, and Southland will go into a screaming economical fiscal heap.
And on that point, that's when the oil companies will show up to re-employ everybody as the saviours, right?
Well, in theory, because yes and no, because of course a lot of the technical skills on the oil plants are actually quite specialist, and a lot of the New Zealanders aren't qualified. And in terms of general labouring, like what you're seeing right now down in Southland.
Hold on. Is that the impression that's being given that they'll come in? Don't worry, the aluminium smelters coming down. The oil companies,
yeah.
but of course they won't inform all the New Zealanders that hey, you won't actually be able to get those jobs at all. You are screwed.
They will get very few jobs, and the jobs that are available, like even right now with the dairy sector down here, if I'm hitchhiking around the countryside, which I tend to do a lot of, I don't get picked up by Southland farmers. I get picked up by Filipinos. They're bringing in Filipinos by literally the boatload that are really nice people, but they're paying them less. So even jobs around here, you can forget it. And look, and it's not even just the dairy farmer. You go to the port sector down here. The reason why they put great big huge security fences around the ports wasn't just to keep Al Qaeda out of the ports. It was to keep the unions from protesting when they start bringing in scab labour. Because Al Qaeda actually have got things like wetsuits and dinghies can row around the back. It's a joke. The laws that were brought in to keep people off the wharves were not designed to counter terrorism. They were designed to make sure that they could bring in cheap workforce. And that's what they're doing. Everything, all infrastructure is set up in Southland already to just get rid of the people at the port that actually want a standard wage and bring in the scab labour.
Well, I see that is kind of an economic, what's it called? That's economic infiltration, isn't it?
Totally.
You have a foreign power come in and you destroy the local economy of all the local people, and then you use that as the excuse, even though you caused the problem, to bring in your own solution, which is the cheap slave labour.
Exactly, and this is the thing down here is the all the things that should be. I'll go backtrack. Once they turned around and realised that there was oil down here in the Southern Basin in the 1970s, the powers that be, and I'm talking both multinationals and foreign governments, both Chinese and US, have come into New Zealand and they've been picking apart the infrastructure of this country ever since. It's almost been like a recipe. If you're going to do something that could be good for the country, no, we won't do that. We'll actually do the very opposite thing. And it's quite interesting. There's a book out there called The Rise and Fall and Flight of Brierley Investments, written by Tony Wall. It's about the collapse of the big shark companies in the late 80s and the early 90s. The land deals that were being done to get land under the radar, which all started off in the 1970s, and we've been paying for it ever since. It's the same trick. Alan Hubbard, South Country Finance. This has just been going on and on and on. And the end result is we don't even own our own land. It used to be a thing down here that if you were a young guy, you would go and work as a sharecrop milker for 30, 40 years, have enough to have your 300 cows, and then you'd be able to go to the bank and borrow a mortgage to get the land. You can forget about it. This generation, this is going to be the first generation of New Zealanders who are dairy, brought up in dairy farming families that will not own their own piece of land.
Yeah, and this is becoming a trend all over the country as well.
Oh, totally.
Even with private home ownership, the amount of people that have private homes is going down pretty significantly. And in fact, not a couple of years ago, TV3 released a report saying that 52% plus of Aucklanders that are currently living in Auckland will never be able to afford their own home.
Oh, totally. And what is interesting?
And even if they could afford their own home, the super city land rates and everything like that are so high and the mortgage rates are so high as well. Even if you could slightly afford it, it'll only be a few years or so before it becomes unaffordable, and you'll lose everything that you put into it in the first place.
Exactly, and it even works the same scale because talking about this whole investment laws that I told you, they changed the laws in 1977 to that basically you could actually invest into New Zealand. Consequences, you look at a place like Auckland, and I'll kind of contrast the both of them. Auckland, EIE, Japanese money laundering operation. They came in the 1990s. They bought up 90% of the real estate in both downtown Brisbane and downtown Auckland. They bought this land. They sold it back to themselves to launder the money, so they artificially inflated the property prices. The end result is the poor little barrister down on Queen Street there, his rent suddenly is tripling, so he's chucking away all his, he's not using fresh milk and fresh ingredients. He's cutting every corner, so he's making crap coffee. He's working his little day out, and he's still not paying the rent. And the same thing's happening down here in Southland, where you have situations where the debt level is just going up and up. I mean, like, put it another way, the Greens turn around and they've changed, they're bringing in this law which to stop cows from pooing in the water. At the same time that the local government has raised rates for water about 95% down here. So the farmer is getting double tapped on that issue. Now, meanwhile, when you look at who actually gets dragged into the courts for pooing in the water, is it the local farmer? No, it's the multinational who looks at the fine, and for him it's a wet slap on the wrist. And all that's happening is it's all these new laws and regulations and artificially inflated property speculation are pushing Kiwis basically off the land. They cannot afford to be there. We're becoming tenants in our own country.
And this is the agenda as well. Interestingly enough, I went to a debate about this, about whether or not we should ban foreign ownership of, or Chinese ownership, specifically. I love it how they make it myopic like that,
Yeah.
Should we ban Chinese investment in New Zealand farms? And the thing that was never talked about during this chat was the fact that there ain't no more land being produced.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're buying a country's products, etc., as they're producing them out of factories, we used to have factories and stuff like that here. No, they've been gone. Basically, the whole country is going to be completely and utterly dependent on multinational corporations, and
totally.
And to the point where we won't just be tenants. We won't be able to afford we will be homeless. We will be, we
will be part of the party, mate. I got to interject right here, right now, because this ties in directly to the whole dairy farm in Southland thing. Back in 1977, when all this stuff was going on in Khashoggi, another thing happened, which was a guy called Sir Douglas Goodwood. He was one of the first people to jump on the joint investment. He was a New Zealander. He owned two companies of importance. One was Amalgamated Dairies, which I'll come back to just very, very shortly, and the other one was Sanford Fisheries. If you look at those companies, Amalgamated Dairies became the New Zealand Dairy Board, which became Fonterra. Fisheries, all the individual quotas that were owned by the fishermen, and so you could go down to the beach and buy a fish off the fishermen, that's all gone. So we no longer have individual fisheries. All the farmers are being pushed off the land and forced into these multinational co-ops where they have to belong whether they like it or not. Here's the joke. Douglas Goodwood was one of the first guys to export goods from Russia. Amalgamated Dairies is actually the term that Lenin uses in his thesis to define what makes him different from Marx. He uses Amalgamated Dairies as the very methodology of how you push people off and force them into basically state-owned system, into basically a communist system, effectively. Globalism, that's the punchline. Globalism and communism, guess what, folks? They're the same thing, just a different language.
Yeah, the globalists created communism. They also created fascism, and
Oh, yeah.
now we're going to have a combination of the two running us. Where
Yep.
communism is when the government takes over the corporations. Fascism is when the corporations take over the government. But the end result for the end user, the citizen, you, is exactly the same.
National socialism. We will have a new world order. Click.
It's very, very nice.
Yeah, we'll play hopscotch on the minefield.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks, Ben, for that, and we'll see you again sometime.
Hey, look, thank you very much, Vinny.
But regardless, I know nothing about it. What is Tiwai, first of all?
Okay, Tiwai is basically a large aluminium smelter. It was one of the projects that was built during the 1980s by Molding under the
And I'm here today with Ben Vidgen from the iFinity FM Southland studios there. Ben, welcome to the program.
Good morning. If you're in it, you've got to ask why.
We're going to talk about the Tiwai.
Oh, certainly, and there's lots of whys here. What would your readers like to specifically know about this? Let's start with what they think they know, and then we can work our way backwards.
First of all, I don't have readers, I have listeners and watchers.
Sorry, I'm Think Big. Probably the money for that, actually, the bridging finance for Think Big actually came from via Anon Khashoggi, and it was probably done as part of a deal. Leave your oil in the Southern Basin and change your investment law so that we can come in and buy all your land and all your infrastructure, so that when we run out of oil, we can have basically taken over your country. So that's the history of Tiwai Point. It's basically been grossly subsidised in the time it's been running. Most households pay 21 cents in the dollar. Tiwai smelter runs at 1 cent in the unit, and that's all about to run out, which is